I'm going to start it. Hey, everybody. How's it going? We are live. Sorry for the bit of a late start there, live stream chat audience. Your Ben Joravsky show is just moments away. By the way, your Ben Joravsky show with a mystery guest.
Whoa, mystery guest has already joined us, but we're not going to give away the mystery, right, D?
Yeah, that's right. Mystery guest, hang tight. We're going to go through the show here, and we'll bring you on. But today's Ben Joravsky show for Thursday, January 28th is moments away. But before we go any further, let's thank our sponsors for bringing you this program. Sponsors like SEIU Healthcare, Illinois, Indiana.
That is correct.
Also sponsors the Chicago Federation of Labor.
That is correct.
And the Chicago Reader. Subscribe to Chicago Reader, chicagoreader.com. Fantastic publication for all things the city of Chicago. What to do, what to eat, where to go. And columns from Ben Joravsky himself. chicagoreader.com. Subscribe. Thank you, Chicago Reader. Okay, we do have a song of the day today. Mystery guess is probably going to be like, what the hell?
She's going to get more than she asked for. Hello, let me just get my voice together here, D.
Yes, this is where we sing a song to make sure the live stream audience can hear us loud and clear. It's our way of doing a sound check. Ben, your song of the day comes from Frank, and it is by Elton John. It's I'm Still Standing.
I'm still standing. Yeah, 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 yeah. G. I don't remember any more about that. I'm still. Mystery guest is like, she's like, oh yeah, I know that song from way back in the day. Mystery guest is like, man, what? I signed up for this thing. No, we'll get to the mystery guest. She enjoyed that rendition of Elton John. I'm still standing.
Oh boy, the Ben Joravsky show starts now. It is Thursday, January 28th, and live from my apartment and his attic, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Today on the program, it's the oh-so-long-awaited return of Sameena Mustafa. And now your host. Oh, there's the brown line. Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
Hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this the annotated Huckabee, and here's why. Sarah Huckabee Sanders announced she's running for governor of Arkansas. I'm not surprised. The current governor's stepping down, so there's a vacancy. Sarah's father, Mike, was a two-term Arkansas governor, so apparently she thinks it's in the genes. To refresh your memory, Sarah Huckabee Sanders was Donald Trump's press secretary for a couple of miserable years back in, I don't know, like 2018. Seems like a century ago.
Are you saying Huckabee or Huckabee?
Huckabee.
Oh, sounds like you're saying. Sounds like saying
what am I saying?
Huckabee, like that dog.
Huckleberry. Sarah Huckleberry Sanders. Anyway, to refresh your memory, she was Donald Trump's press secretary for a couple years back in 2018, I think it was, Dean. Don't quote me on that one. She routinely BS'd reporters, bent the truth like a pretzel, served the president. You pick up the tab. That's my general problem with press secretaries, ladies and gentlemen, for the mayor, for the governor, whatever. They are public employees, but they work for private bosses. They're like PR operatives for the mayor, the governor, the president, whatever. That's another story. Anyway, I mentioned yesterday that her campaign emailed me a fundraising pitch. Not sure why they keep sending them to me, but they do. And now as a public service, I like to break it down just to let you know that Trump may have left the White House. He may have been banished from Twitter, at least for the moment, but Trumpism is very much alive in this country, and his disciples are running for office, and they control the Republican Party. So folks, this shit show is not over. So here we go. The fundraising letter opens like this. Friend, America is great because we are free. But today, our freedom and the rule of law are under attack. To remain free, we must have law and order and resolve our differences peacefully. Now, you may think that when Sarah mentions the need for law and order, she's talking about stopping Trump insurrectionists from storming the Capitol. But if you think that, you're wrong, as the next sentence makes clear. Quote, the radical left's solution is to impose government control and censorship from the top down. But their socialism and cancel culture will not heal America. It will only further divide and destroy us. See that, ladies and gentlemen? The radical left. That's the people she thinks need law and order. Radical left is a catchphrase that includes long hair, hippie type white guys and black people. Pretty much all black people, except for like the 1, 2, 3, or 4 that showed up with the Capitol insurrectionists, and maybe the 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 who actually did vote for Donald Trump. But all the other black people, they need law and order. And when she talks about cancel culture, she's not talking about Colin Kaepernick, who was banned from the NFL because he took a knee at the national anthem. No, she's talking about every right-wing operative and politician who feels they have a God-given right to say whatever they want to say, no matter who it offends. For the record, none of them have been canceled. They still have their radio shows, their TV shows, their newspaper columns, etc., which they use to whine about being canceled. As I like to point out, Rupert Murdoch complains about being canceled, and he owns Fox. Let's go on with the fundraising appeal from Sarah. Everything we love about America's at stake, she writes, and with the radical left now in control of Washington, your governor is your last line of defense, end of quote. I'd like to point out that the president of the United States is Joe Biden. The Speaker of the House is Nancy Pelosi. The president of the Senate is Charles Schumer. None of them are radical, much less left. They're mainstream Democrats. As such, they are subject to withering criticism from people who really are on the left, as anyone who listens to my show can tell you. Check out my interview with Sam Holloway from just the other day, a real leftist, very critical of Joe Biden, or my interview with Leonard Goodman, another real leftist, or Miles Kampf-Lassin, or today's interview with Sameena Mustafa. The list goes on and on. Joe Biden is a centrist. He got elected by promising to work with Republicans. He assured Democrats that Republicans really do want to work together, even though most Democrats know that. It's just not the case. And it's not even clear if centrist Joe can get his programs through the Senate because of Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin, a Democrat from West Virginia, wants to form a moderate coalition with Susan Collins, Republican senator of Maine, to block anything that resembles basic liberal programs. So it's pretty clear that the radical left is not in charge. In fact, at any given day, the mainstream left is really irritated at the radical left. Sort of like, if you think about it, Mayor Lori Lightfoot's attitude toward Stacey Davis Gates. But that doesn't stop Sarah from inventing a made-up boogeyman that she can exploit to whip up support for MAGA as she goes on to pledge to defend your right to be free of socialism and tyranny. Man, if the only tyranny you face is having to wear a mask in a grocery store, you've had a good life, MAGA. Is this all a lie from Sarah? Of course it is. But as we've learned from her days as press secretary, she's really good at bending the truth. And speaking of Donald Trump, I just got this email update from the Huckabee campaign. Did you hear? Our campaign just got a major endorsement from Donald Trump. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is a warrior who will always fight for the people of Arkansas and do what is right, not what is politically correct. Sarah is tough on borders, tough on crime, and fully supports our great law enforcement officers, end of quote from President Donald Trump. Unless, of course, it's MAGA that's hitting those great law enforcement officers over the head with a hockey stick. Then maybe Sarah doesn't support them that much. We got a great show today, everybody. Sameena Mustafa will be here at 2 o'clock. We got a mystery guest, but I'm not going to say one word about this mystery guest.
Don't say a word.
Not one word. Not one word. Zip goes my mouth. Instead, I'll turn things over to the man, the myth, the legend, the pride and joy of Alton, Illinois, who our mystery guest will probably tell you back home in Alton is called Dr. D.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Also, Sameena Mustafa will be joining us. Not a mystery guest. Isn't that right, Ben?
Yes, Sameena Mustafa. I think I said that already, but if in case I missed that, yes. Sameena Mustafa, you may remember her. She was on the show all the time, and she hasn't been on since, like, I don't know, October for some reason. I can't remember. But anyway, Sameena Mustafa ran for Congress in the 5th Congressional District in 2018. I like to call her Chicago's AOC. And she's a good friend of the show, and she'll be on from a new location, which we'll disclose in a little while.
Oh, so many mysteries on this show today.
It's like a mystery wrapped in a mystery with a mystery wrapped around the mystery.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Dennis. What's happening in Chicago and or Illinois, you ask? Well, we're about to find out. We begin in Chicago, and once again, we begin with our coverage on the Chicago Teachers Union. The mayor and her Chicago Public School squad are still hell-bent on getting teachers back into the classroom as their pandemic is over, but not really. Hey, let's try to reopen Chicago plan moves ahead. And the Chicago Teachers Union, yes, the people who read books for a living, they are still set on not returning to in-person learning. That is, until teachers and students are promised a safe and healthy return. And we're going to be speaking with our mystery guest about this later on. But first, let's catch everyone up on today's news from the Chicago Sun-Times in Nadir Issa. The headline reads, CPS cancels in-person learning Thursday as impasse with CTU continues. Chicago Public Schools has canceled another day of in-person classes for preschool and special education students as it continues to negotiate over reopening all elementary schools with the Chicago Teachers Union. The district told families in an email sent Wednesday night to not send their children to schools Thursday. The email said, quote, Chicago Teachers Union leadership continues to direct their members who support pre-K and cluster programs to remain at home. Therefore, we must ask parents to continue keeping your children home as we are unable to guarantee adequate staffing levels to cover in-person learning. We are doing everything in our power to reach a deal that satisfies the union's priorities and allows you to choose the instructional model that meets the needs of your children. We regret any distress this situation has caused, especially for children who have been learning happily and safely in their classrooms for the past few weeks. CPS remains fully committed to reaching an agreement that will allow our students in pre-K and cluster programs, as well as our elementary school students who chose to come back to school. And for those wondering what our Democratic Illinois governor has to say about a city of 3 million reopening its schools, well, it's kind of strange, actually. Governor J.B. Pritzker, he's acting like none of this is going on at the moment, but Pritzker said at a new mass vaccination site in north suburban Grays Lake that getting Illinois vaccinated and open is, quote, going to take time and people are going to have to be patient. So yes, patience is the game. Ben Joravsky, question. When it comes to this dispute between the CTU and the CPS, who would you say has been more patient?
Well, definitely the Chicago Teachers Union has been more patient. If by patient you mean waiting until we have vaccine for all the employees who have to go back to the classroom before we reopen the schools, that would definitely mean that the Chicago Teachers Union has been more patient. And let me just, so much to unpack with what you just said, Dennis. But just one thing that just struck me when I was listening to you read that statement, it's about children happily in the classroom. And it's like, I mean, it just goes, it's all preposterous. I love teachers. Everybody knows I love teachers, but I was not a great student. I'm just going to make a confession here, ladies and gentlemen. I was not a great student. I staggered through school, and in many ways, it was like really sympathetic teachers that socially promoted me to graduation. That enabled me to get through high school. It was like an ordeal. So this notion, it's just like, it's just so made up. Like the little children happily in the classrooms. It's like, man, some kids love school. I'm sure they're really happy. But I'm just speaking for myself. Most again, like just hearing that press release bears no relation to reality. You know what I'm saying, D? So many kids are going through school. It's like, oh man, I got another. And maybe it's like after school activity gets them through it. Maybe it's like the basketball team gets it through them, or the drama program gets it through it, or the music program, or hanging out with their friends in the cafeteria. But I'm just telling, it's like they feed us this garbage day in and day out and expect us to eat it and call it lunch. You know, oh, those little happy children in the classroom. Just hearing that, D, is like propaganda that the Trump White House might write. Instead, it's coming from the Board of Education. And let me say this about J.B. Pritzker. Governor Pritzker, you know, really basically like what you've been doing, and I understand that you're under a lot of pressure in the state, but it really would be nice if you showed some leadership in this one and used your authority. You know, I would like to see Governor Pritzker, Senator Durbin, Senator Duckworth, who else? Who else is prominent from the state of Illinois? Gather together to ask President Biden to send in the vaccines we need. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a serious health crisis we're facing. We're asking all these employees to go back to school. In fact, it's a health crisis that's been existing since last March. And the vaccines became available. I don't know, when did they become available, Dee? In November? And we still don't have enough vaccines. I would say this constitutes like a problem, just to put it mildly, a problem. So I would like to see our leadership united instead of everybody just pretending as though this problem, this potential labor breakdown between the Chicago Teachers Union and Lori Lightfoot doesn't affect them, doesn't involve them. They're not even aware of it, which is how our Congress people and our senators and our governor are acting. I wish they would get together and help us find a solution, Dee, by demanding that we get the vaccines that we need so that employees get vaccinated. That's just something I would like to see, some leadership from the people in Illinois. All right. Now, Dee, before you go a little further, I think it's time to do something we don't usually do in the first hour and bring on a mystery guest. And this mystery guest, I talked about yesterday, and I told a little story about many, many years ago when I was a grammar school coach in Chicago. I got together with Lisa Pugh, shout out Lisa, and we put together a 7th and 8th grade girls softball team. And this was not the greatest 7th and 8th grade girls softball team, to put it mildly. Like one of my star players, I put star in quotes, came to me one time and said, Coach Ben, and I'm not going to name her names because I don't want to out her, but let's just say her name was Amber. She came to me and said, Coach Ben, I don't want to play today because my fingernails she had these long fingernails. What softball coach in the world has to deal with a star baseball player not wanting to play because, I don't know, she just got her fingernails fixed? Anyway, this next guest showed up one day. I'd never seen her play softball before. She swung the bat. Man, she hit that ball so freaking far. Anyway, so I figured we're going to call her Slugger. So welcome to the show, Slugger.
I'm happy to be here.
All right. So this is the reason I brought Slugger to the show, and I'm not giving her real name because she's a teacher in the Chicago Public Schools, and I'm very concerned that any teacher who speaks the truth in Chicago these days is going to get punished. I've got that in my mind. I saw what the Chicago Public Schools did to Troy LaRaviere, the principal of Blaine. I go, you know what? You speak the truth around here, and they punish you. So I can't live with that. I've known Slugger since she was in 5th grade. I love this girl, so I don't want anything bad to happen to her. But she sent me a text yesterday, right before the show, that really opened my eyes about what teachers know about what's going on in Chicago. And so Mayor Lori Lightfoot and Janice Jackson, it seems as though you don't get to hear from Chicago teachers enough. You know, I mean, they're not part of the power structure at City Hall or the Board of Education. They're just like these operatives that you send out into the fields and you want them to be quiet and do whatever they tell you. Why don't you just listen to a teacher, give a sense of what is really going on? So Slugger, let's start. Let's break down some of the things you told me in that text yesterday from your experience. You're one of the teachers that went back to school January 11th. Is that correct?
That's right. Actually, January 4th, pre-K and cluster teachers were asked to return, I guess, to set up and prepare for students on the 11th. I chose not to go in that first week just because I had no in-person students returning, and it didn't seem, to make much sense to go into a building that I did not feel was safe to return to. So I ended up going in the last 2 weeks, and I saw a lot of stuff in those 2 weeks, and I was with no students. I was with no other staff back yet. There was no K through 8 back yet. That was just pre-K and cluster back. And so in that short time, I saw, I was in my room. I came in on the 11th. My room had a little tiny air purifier that they're saying is supposed to be so nice and, safe and, make sure our rooms are nicely filtered and ventilated. And it's this little small machine that they even said is only good for rooms that are up to 500 square feet. My room all of our classrooms are bigger than that. So we don't feel safe with just one purifier that they're, on the news always saying is so safe. And immediately there was no PPE like they guaranteed us to be. There's supposed to be masks and disinfectant wipes and just different things that weren't in there. So we had to page and stalk and find the engineer. Well, here comes the engineer. No mask. You have maintenance walking around with no mask, engineers with no mask. Some of the staff that's already been back, like clerks and, techcos and things like that. They just, have just been, I think, a little loose around there because it hasn't been a lot of people, but that can't be the case when you've got kids and more staff coming back. So
let's just break this down for 1 second. So one of the things that we hear over and over and over from the mayor and the head of CPS is that everybody's wearing masks. You're telling me that when you went back to the school, there were just people like the engineer walking around the building without a mask?
Yes, that is correct. Several people actually, and that it goes in as high as the administration. So APs, principals, everyone is, like I said, I think they've got comfortable that there's not a lot of people in the building. And so they were like, well, it's only a few of us here, so we don't need to wear a mask. But no, everyone needs to be wearing a mask. It does not matter if there's one or two of you in there.
And another thing that we've heard a lot from the Board of Education, which really caught me off guard, they put this out, I've seen it in the newspapers, that $100 million, this is what they say, $100 million was spent cleaning up the schools and preparing this. I had two reactions. Number one, where'd you find $100 million? Yeah. Just like last year, you were crying, you were broke. All of a sudden, you found $100 million. Isn't that funny? How they could just find $100 million? Yeah, I wish I could find 100. So, but was there any evidence that there would have been cleanup of your school? Was your school clean?
They had these little signs, like when you go to a hotel and you put do not disturb, every classroom handle had one and said it was thoroughly deep cleaned by, whoever. It was this little checklist that was sitting on my table that wasn't even checked off. And it was a list of things that they were supposed to do before, going in or cleaning every classroom. That wasn't done. I mean, me and my assistant, we went through in 2 weeks. I promise you this. We got a tub of 500 disinfectant wipes. We used them all in 2 weeks because we were wiping down stuff. We would wipe it down. It'd be gray and black by the time we were done. We were doing the work once we got there. They were not already cleaned as if they were saying. And like you said yesterday on the show, the picture I sent you, that was from another school of a pre-K classroom. And she went in there and no heat. She's been sitting in her classroom with no heat. She's had students since the 11th, preschoolers, that are sleeping on their cots in coats because it's so cold in their classrooms. She then also, the kids are playing in the housekeeping area. There's dead mice everywhere. There's roaches everywhere, but they're so clean, right? So clean. Yeah,
that's the one that got to me, the picture of the dead mouse. And I talked about it a lot, and some of our listeners they were giving me a hard time because they were trying to eat their lunch. So here we are talking about the dead mouse again. So this picture, a dead mouse in the classroom.
Yep, dead mouse, and several of them, several dead mice in the classroom. And then there was another section where there was roaches that were trapped to some glue trap that were meant for mice. So it's just clearly, and these are with students in the classroom. So this is not you've been gone for the summer and, you come back and you gotta, no, this is, I get we've been gone since March, but staff has been in there since August and even before that in the summer. So these rooms that have these nice little fancy signs that say they're so clean, that's not the case when teachers are going in and having to clean it themselves.
Or when they go in and they see a dead mouse.
Yeah,
so when you hear reports, when you hear the mayor say, we've done absolutely everything we have to do to make sure it's safe. And when you see the CEO of the Chicago Public Schools say, we've done absolutely everything we have to do to make it safe. And when you see them say, tell the reporters that we spent $100 million cleaning up these schools so that there's just no reason why teachers should be afraid to go in, and they're just being whipped up by their evil teachers union. When you hear and see that stuff and you go into a classroom and you see cockroaches and mice and they all have heat, what does that do in terms of their credibility in your mind?
Oh, it's shot. It is just absolutely shot. I mean, I was telling this to you yesterday, my 3-year-old daughter, when she sees Janice Jackson and Lori Lightfoot get on the TV in a press conference, she goes, "Mommy, they're lying. They're all lying." And this is from a 3-year-old's mouth. And that's just from her hearing me one time saying that after watching a press conference. But it's just a bunch of lies. Like, people who are physically in these buildings know that it's a bunch of crap that they're saying. Like, that's not the case in these schools. And it may be in some schools, but I teach on the west side. That's not the case for me. That's just not what my school looks like. And unfortunately, administration, so principals and APs are asked to, they're given a very basic or a skeleton plan of how to make your school safe. And then they're asked to then do the, really make it come to life by asking teachers input in this. But if you go into a school today, it's not like someone was gave them a plan and said, yeah, do this. This is exactly what we need to do. No, we had to all meet weekly for hours to make these plans so that we felt safe when and if children and staff return into those buildings. So when they get on there and say it's ready, it's not. It's
so what
staff doing
in your mind, what do you need to see happen before you feel it's safe to go back to classrooms with the kids in the classrooms?
I definitely believe the vaccination is a big step for sure. That's just, giving us all some safety that, puts us in a better place. I do feel like there needs to, they're making it seem these schools are so prepared. We have ventilation systems that are not set up. I was there for 2 weeks and we had no heat in my actual classroom. The engineer was in and out saying that, oh, it's fit. We're working on it. We're fixing it. We're going to get to it. But it's like, this stuff has to be done before you're asking families to come back. I don't know why they're so set on February 1st. Like, if we're having issues, I've been in there for only 2 weeks and teachers have been there 3 weeks and are having these issues. We're not ready. February 1st is Monday. Like, we are not ready. So let's make sure that we continue to do remote learning. We can try to perfect that, keep that going. And then in the meantime, we're really getting these schools prepared. So vaccinations, making sure they're clean, making sure classrooms have heat, making sure the ventilation is up to par, as they're saying. And all these ADA accommodations, you don't have the staffing right now for everybody to come back. You're saying all these students are coming back on the 1st, but you have several teachers who are going to be out because of ADA accommodations. So we are not prepared. And that's exactly why they told parents of pre-K and cluster students to stay home these past days, because they knew they didn't have the staff. Without teachers, you can't run the school. So you've got to get it to it where it's safe. And you have all this, we've been out since March. We've had a lot of time to get these classrooms ready. And let's just hold it off a little bit more until we, can get vaccinated, and that puts us all in a better place to be in front of students and staff.
And by the way, when you refer to the ADA exemption, these are teachers who, for whatever reason, maybe they're pregnant, maybe they have some health issues that really makes them vulnerable to COVID-19, to having serious health consequences from getting the virus. So the bureaucracy has given them permission not to go back to the classroom. And this in itself is a joke. Slugger and I were talking about yesterday. I did a just column for the Reader where I was talking to other teachers. And it's like, this is why teachers don't believe when the mayor gets up there and says, oh, everything's perfect and safe. Because there was the one story, which I wrote about, and then you told me it was a common. It was another teacher, not this one, another teacher got an email from the central office saying that she had been exempted from having to go to the classroom, and it was addressed to somebody else. It wasn't addressed to her. It's like, she didn't even ask for an exemption, and she got the email. So she sent the email. She looked at the email address and sent it on, forwarded it to the person who supposedly was supposed to get it. And what I've since learned from you is that like dozens of teachers have gotten
Yep, dozens of teachers got it. And this picture being one of those teachers who are waiting to hear back to get an approval from ADA, and you get this, and it's like, you've been approved for, and it's not even your name. Like, come on, you guys are sending this to hundreds of teachers saying that they got approved, and it's not even for the right person. Like, you can't take this. You can't make this stuff up. Like, it's just unbelievable. So yeah. Teachers got that. And like you said, I wrote that down when Dennis said it about happy and like happy. My preschoolers being stuck at a table all day, not being able to play with one another. You know, you can't share toys. My whole day is about teaching social emotional skills, how to share, how to play with one another. That wouldn't be happening if kids were in the classroom. I can't do that. They'd be miserable. They wouldn't be happy. They'd be like, oh, I'd rather stay at home. Like, this is crap. I can't even play with my friend. I can't share toys with them. You know, and that can change once people get a vaccination, but happy, far from it. The kids would be miserable sitting in that classroom all day.
And I was just speaking just in terms of like what I was like. I was really thinking of my days as a high school kid when I was so unhappy in school. But that's just what I'm saying. Like, the happy little children frolicking in the school, dodging the mouse, the dead mouse and the cockroaches.
Yeah, walking.
They're so happy.
Yeah.
Wow, the heat doesn't work. Guys, you spent $100 million. You didn't pay the heating bill? What's going on? So before we let you go, Slugger, and by the way, I know Mama Slugger is listening. A little shout out to Mama Slugger, an old friend of mine. What would you like to say to Lori Lightfoot and Janice Jackson? Clearly, they don't hear from teachers enough, and maybe they never ever see any teachers in their routine life. There's no teachers on the school board. There's no teachers on the Chicago City Council. There's no teachers in the mayor's office. So maybe they never met a teacher. Well, Janice Jackson was a teacher at one point. So maybe they haven't seen any teachers recently. So what would you like to, in closing, tell them that they should know?
Teachers want to teach. We miss our students. I miss waking up every day and walking into my classroom and setting up and seeing my children's little smiling faces. And just right now, that's not possible. So when we can get there and when it's actually safe, not what you're saying on the TV and spreading these lies to people, but when it is actually safe, when schools are clean, when they're set up with proper ventilation, when we have the vaccination, we cannot wait to get back in our classrooms. But until then, we all completely feel unsafe, and we do not want to risk our lives to teach our students in unsafe buildings. We are ready to remain remote until it is safe for us to be in those buildings.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Maybe bring you back next week for an update. How about that?
Sounds good. It was great being on. Thank you for having me.
All right, take care. Very good. All right, Dee, that was our mystery guest. Now back to the news. What you got for me?
Big thank you to Slugger for being on the program.
Well, I didn't want to give Slugger's name out. It was so hard not to, because I've known Slugger since she was in 5th grade, as I said. She did a great job. She did a really good job.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on here. Let's see. Oh, no public event scheduled for Mayor Lori Lightfoot.
I won't just turn the car around. I'm going to shut it off. I'm going to kick you out, and I'm going to make you walk home.
And we have quite a bit of statewide news to discuss. But before we get to that, Ben, guess who just got another op-ed published?
Thank you, Chicago, for this humbling victory. All I can say, you sure know how to make a guy feel at home.
Don't sound too excited. For those who were unaware, from time to time, our former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel likes to channel his inner Ben Joravsky by putting his political opinion onto paper and sharing it with the world with op-ed columns. He also channels his inner Ben Joravsky with a podcast. But does he still do that podcast?
I don't think so. I think he quit that podcast when he stopped being mayor. It's a great loss to the broadcasting industry, I'm sure. But, I don't think he does the podcast anymore.
That would have been funny if he did in the pandemic, and then he'd be doing it from his house, and you can hear the brown line at his house. Like, quit stealing our bits, buddy.
He doesn't live that close to the brown line. But anyway, go ahead.
But believe it or not, our host sharing his opinion on the mayor's political opinion tends to give us decent podcast segments. So let's read his latest work and see if we can get some award-winning content. Come on, Ben, here we go. This Rahm Emanuel piece comes from Politico, and it's titled, How to Calm America's 100-year storm.
Yeah.
The violence on display during the January 6th Capitol insurrection has forced Americans across the political spectrum to ask what has gone so wrong. Beyond the horror of the underlying crime, the insurrection, not to mention the support it received from so many corners of our society, was an unmistakable symptom of a cancer in the body politic. Even amid a global pandemic and an economic catastrophe, finding ways to combat the underlying cancer and to root out the anger and dissatisfaction that drives it represents the thorniest and most lasting challenge the nation will face under President Joe Biden's leadership. I'm going to stop there. Ben, I sent you this piece this morning, and you said you read it. Your thoughts, please.
I did read it. I did not know it existed until you told me about it. So I have mixed feelings about it. On one hand, I was having a great morning, and then I read this thing, and so I kind of wish it was so irritating and annoying I hadn't read it. But I guess it's important to know what Rahm's up to. And I sent it on to Sameena to get her thoughts about it as well. All right. What can I say about Rahm Emanuel? Rahm Emanuel is shameless. We all know that. Rahm Emanuel is all about promoting Rahm Emanuel. We also know he was a terrible mayor. I think it's pretty obvious that almost everybody in Chicago, well, not everybody, the powers that be, the wealthiest people in the city of Chicago liked Rahm Emanuel. And there's that very telling scene in City So Real, the Steve James documentary about the 2019 mayoral election, when a group of well-to-do people are sitting around Christy Hefner's living room or penthouse, and they're talking about what a great job Rahm did and how they wish Rahm was still the mayor, and et cetera and so forth. So yes, I would say that the 1% thoroughly appreciated Rahm. But Rahm ruled. How did Rahm? Rahm was like a Mitt Romney Republican. And as such, he called for reform. And then even in this essay, D, he's talking about like dealing with populist programs. He can't break himself away from these old instincts. And the old instinct is to talk about reform. And in Chicago and Illinois, when politicians talk about reform, they mean taking away programs that benefit like the great majority of people, and then using the savings, in quote, to give more benefits to the 1%. That's what reform means in Chicago and Illinois. And it's just that word is thrown around. I've urged people, don't say reform. Don't say school reform. So when Rahm first came into office, we just talked about this with Sam Holloway. When Rahm first came into office, pension reform. What did that mean? Cutting pensions. So people dedicate their whole life to what? Being a firefighter, being a cop, being a teacher. Rahm's going to cut their pensions and save the money so he can do what? Give money for handouts to big-time developers like the Lincoln Yards developer, or literally give money to Jeff Bezos. So Amazon, remember when Bezos was playing Rahm and Rauner like fools? He had every single city and every single state like competing to see who would give him the biggest handout to build his headquarters. And then it turned out he walked away from a deal in New York. He didn't like it. Ended up with a much smaller version in Virginia. But the point is like, that is exactly the kind of what trickled down economics that just made so many people disillusioned with the Democratic Party. So for Rahm Emanuel to give advice to Joe Biden about what Joe Biden has to do as we are in this critical moment in our history, I'd just like to take a moment to say it's the Rahm Emanuels of the world, the Democratic Party, who bear a big responsibility for the election of Donald Trump. There are so many people who don't believe Democrats at all. I know them, I see them all. Many millennials who absolutely have no confidence in the Democratic Party. They like Bernie because Bernie spoke directly to them. But the Rahm Emanuels of the Democratic Party despised Bernie Sanders. They said Bernie Sanders is reaching too far, promising you things that he can't give you. He shouldn't promise you that your student loans will be forgiven, that public college can be paid for by the government. No, that's too much. So here's Rahm Emanuel, suddenly a crisis that people like him had a large part in making. I mean, I could go through Rahm's administration. Everything he did was the opposite of what like people in Chicago wanted. closed 50 schools, never gave a reason for closing the 50 schools, hastened the removal of black people from the city of Chicago. Isn't that interesting now? Chicago, I forget how many thousands and thousands of black people left the city. Whole bunch of reasons for them leaving the city. It was never considered a problem in the Rahm Emanuel administration. Rahm was all about using the tax dollars to promote gentrification, which forces people out of the city. He was using tax dollars to benefit the wealthiest neighborhoods in the city. Now, all of a sudden, when we've seen the failures of those programs have resulted in people being so disillusioned with government that they turn to a huckster and a con artist like Donald Trump, suddenly Rahm Emanuel has learned, is giving advice. Why did he follow some of that advice when he was mayor, when it would have mattered? I don't know. I don't watch the George Stephanopoulos show, but our good friend Pat Whalen does. And from time to time, he'll update me on Rahm Emanuel and Chris Christie. To me, epitomize everything that's wrong with politics in the last decade. One was the Republican governor of New Jersey. The other was the Democratic, quote, in quotes, mayor of Chicago. And they were all about promoting themselves. And they were all about using tax dollars to help the wealthiest people. And they were all about telling everybody else to go along with the reforms. So here we are. Nobody has much faith in Democratic politicians. I shouldn't say nobody. I should say that the large numbers of people that you would expect to vote Democratic have no faith in Democratic politicians. And here comes Rahm to give advice. Rahm, don't give us any advice. That's my advice to you. No more advice. That's my advice.
No more advice. That's my advice. I like that. All right. Anything else you'd like to say there before we move on?
No, I think more will be said maybe with Sameena Mustafa when she comes on in about 15 minutes. She may have something to say about Rahm.
All right, let's move on to the statewide news. Today, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker was at Morton East High School at noon to tour the Morton East Adolescent Health Center vaccination site. Ben, any guess as to what mascot Morton East would be?
Morton East, yeah, that's Cicero. Morton East, I've seen their basketball team. The Blue Devils.
Is that your final answer? Blue Devils?
Yes, I just pulled that from the sky.
Are you sure that's your final answer?
Yes.
Yeah, you're wrong. It's actually the Mustangs.
Oh, yeah, Mustang Sally.
There we go. Now, Ben, you're an avid high school basketball fan. It was just announced that the season will be returning. Will you be attending any Morton Mustangs games?
No, but actually, Morton Mustangs, I have to throw this out there. They had a pretty good team about 6 years ago. I saw them at the Proviso West tournament, and they were pretty good. Like a lot of ball movement. They had this big husky guy playing center. I still with the long hair. I love that guy. He was like 6'3". You could tell he annoyed the other players because he was just like this husky guy that leaned on him. Looked more like a football player. You know that type when they play basketball? They're really annoying. Anyway, I thought it was a pretty good team. Very disciplined ball movement. But I will not be attending any games until I get the vaccine. Sorry. I don't even know if the story says are they going to be letting fans into the gyms to watch the games? I don't think they're going to be letting fans in. I think they're just going to allow the players to play. Isn't that correct, young man?
You know, I'm not sure, but boy, it was an excellent segue for you to talk more about it, huh?
Yes, I could do more reminiscence of the Morton East Mustangs. Morton East, primarily known for great baseball teams back in the 60s and 70s. But so it's interesting. They're going to open up the basketball season. I think they're going to have football as well. And when I read the article in the Tribune, my memory is I don't have it in front of me, that they're going to make the players wear masks. I didn't see that in the Sun-Times coverage, but I thought I saw that in the Tribune coverage. It's really interesting playing basketball with a mask. But you know what, Dee? My attitude is like the kids are like losing their minds. They're probably playing basketball anyway. So it's sort of like opening the restaurants, All right, you guys want to do it? Who am I to say no? I know that if I had a high school kid at home who was a basketball player, had missed out on his or her, senior season or junior season, they would be so upset. So I do believe there's some collateral damage to missing out on all. Like, oh my God, all the kids who couldn't be in the plays, who couldn't be in the orchestra, just all these, the moments that make high school almost endurable. We were talking about how the happy children, you know, that little press release that they said, the happy children frolicking through their classroom. Well, there were some things that made high school endurable for kids. For me, it was being on the White Sox fan club. You know, oh, wow, every Wednesday, a White Sox fan club meeting. And we had lemonade and brownies. And let's talk about the White Sox. Oh, it wasn't every Wednesday. It was maybe like once a month. But, you know, and then field trips to Comiskey Park to watch the White Sox play. Gee, that got me through high school, all right? You know, and then the chess club, me and the chess club. Better move this one here.
Also known as the White Dorks meeting.
Actually, I was only in the chess club for about a day. Oh, this is too hard. I'll just go back to the White Sox fan club. Oh, that's a lot easier. So, yeah, I'm very sympathetic to the kids who are losing their mind in the middle of this pandemic. Is no joke. So yeah, they're going to open up sports. I think they're going to do all sports at once, D. It's going to be like the gym will be packed. Oh, that's safe.
I agree with Kyle on the live stream chat. He goes, why are we doing this? No fans. We have to wear masks. Who is this for?
Yeah, it's a valid point. Well, it's for there's a lot of parents, Kyle, who really want to see their kids play. The kids want to play. I don't know. There's just so much insanity out here because the reality is we're in a pandemic and it's a very dangerous time, and you have to make adjustments for public safety, and the adjustments are very painful. It's just across the board. It's not just in Chicago. I saw this in a story in the New York Times, or I think it was the New York Times, about the schools in Wausau, Wisconsin. Everybody's at each other's throats. You know, like the open the school faction is fighting with the close the schools, keep the schools closed faction. They're going at it. There was a school system in Cobb County, Georgia. This is just unbelievable, D, where there's a faction of the school system that doesn't even believe in wearing masks. The teacher died down there, and at a board meeting, one of the teacher's friends asked the school board members, to put on a mask just as a sign of appreciation for the career of this teacher that died. They wouldn't put the masks on. It was more important for them not to put a mask on and to show that they didn't feel they had to wear a mask than to honor this teacher who had died from COVID-19. So yeah, it's an utterly insane situation. And part of it is the fault of the last administration, no doubt, sort of led the crusade or the movement that somehow or other it was an infringement on your liberty to make you wear a mask and protect other people. So now we have like half the country that doesn't want to wear masks. And the other half wants to wear masks, but at the same time wants their kid to be on the basketball team. Utter madness, dear. We can't get these vaccines out soon enough. But no, got to take our time because the drug companies need to make their money.
And you're talking about that high school in Georgia. That was Alex Jones High, right? That was the name of it?
Yeah, it's good. Very good. We don't need masks. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the proof. How about that, D, huh?
That's pretty good. Here, try it again. Now do it.
We don't need masks, ladies and gentlemen. I have the proof. But first, I gotta sell you this water. Oh wait, what is he selling? He's selling something.
The neighbor thing. Remember?
I'm gonna be up my neighbor's ass.
It's actually, I'm going to eat my neighbor's ass, but hey, we'll take it.
Wait, did he say I'm gonna eat my neighbor's ass?
Yeah.
Is that what he said? Oh my God. Ladies and gentlemen, you made that man very wealthy. Alex Jones. There's a sucker born every minute, and a lot of them are watching the Alex Jones show and buying whatever he's selling.
So there's that update on high school basketball. And you know, it's been a snowy week in Illinois, and if you plan on riding a snowmobile at all, well, please listen up and take notes as Illinois Department of Natural Resources spokesperson Rachel Torbert gives you some snowmobile safety tips.
First and foremost, when you're out on a snowmobile, never consume alcohol or drugs before or during your ride. Make sure you have a friend or a buddy with you so that you've got somebody watching you and helping you if something goes wrong.
Oh, I heard that. Rachel, anything else?
Drowning is one of those causes of snowmobile fatalities that we see because people, you know, they feel like the ice is probably thick enough. They take that sled out there and then find out too late that it's not.
All right, moving on. How about that?
I'm sure a lot of people are following the advice. No drinking or drugging while you're out there snowmobiling.
All our snowmobile riders, you are welcome. All right, moving on. Let's talk about map redistricting. Ben, we may have a problem on our hands here. For those who may be, by the way, Ben, for those who may not be uber local political nerds like you, what is map redistricting and why is it so important?
Well, I know that everybody listening to this show at this very moment on the live stream knows what map redistricting is. But so for the benefit of some of the people who download the podcast may not know, we redistrict every 10 years after the census because there's this notion. Oh, God, Dee, I'm just warming up. I feel it coming on. I feel just like one of my obsessions about to hit me. There's this notion embedded in the Constitution that no one person's vote should be more significant than another person's vote. So if you have a legislative district that has 10 people in it, and you have another legislative district that has 100 people in it, the people in the 10-person district have more legislative power than the other people because there's fewer people in the district, so they have more representation. And as we all know, no taxation without representation. It's got to be equal. It's got to be fair. Now, what you're thinking, Dee? Well, if that's so, Ben, and I know you're thinking this, I could read your mind. It's like a Gordon Lightfoot song. If I could read your mind, I'm reading this right now. I'm going to avoid the section of your mind that deals with pornography. I'm going to move to the next branch.
Hey.
And and you're asking, well, Ben, if no one vote should be greater than another, how come we allow the Electoral College? And that is an excellent question. In other words, the Electoral College itself is a contradiction to this basic premise of democracy that requires us to do a redistricting every 10 years and exist. Why does Electoral College exist? Because it benefits the Republican Party. They're going to do absolutely everything they can do to keep it, because without the Electoral College, they would be out of luck. They wouldn't control anything. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. So every 10 years, there's after the census, we reapportion, redo the boundaries of all the legislative districts to make sure that each district has more or less the same number of people in it as the next district. So we're going to redo the ward maps in the city of Chicago. We're going to redo the legislative maps throughout the state of Illinois, the state Senate maps, the Supreme Court judicial maps. The judges, their maps will be redrawn, and not just in Illinois. It happens in all 50 states. The congressional maps get redrawn. We were just talking about this yesterday in an interview I did with a downstate Democrat. Who knows? I think Illinois will probably lose a congressional district because the number of people in the state has fallen. So there's going to be a real scramble to see who gets stuck in what district and who it just gets iced out completely.
So there you go. Hope that helped people out there who may be confused on map redistricting. We're going to pause it right there. For this story, we go to Illinois Politico. Shia Kapos did a bang-up job in explaining this in layman's terms. Well, she did the best she could. Shia Kapos in Illinois Politico writes, quote, "A wrench has been thrown into Illinois' redistricting plans. The census data needed to determine how to redraw the boundaries for most every elected office in the state may not be turned over until well into the summer because of pandemic-driven delays. Detailed census data is usually delivered by the end of March, but this year, states shouldn't expect it before July 30th, a spokeswoman for the U.S. Census Bureau said Wednesday. That was during a webinar with the National Conference of State Legislatures. This poses a scheduling problem. The Illinois Constitution requires that redistricting be directed by the State House of Representatives and completed by June 30th. If that deadline is not met, then a bipartisan committee must be formed. That would give Republicans a bigger say in a process that would otherwise be dominated by Democrats, who hold huge margins in the chamber to determine how boundaries are drawn for the State House and Senate seats, as well as for city and county elected seats. Election attorney Michael Dorf expects House Democrats will have a workaround using census estimates so it can meet the constitutional requirement to have a map drawn by June 30th. Boy, what the hell did I just read there, Ben Joravsky?
Well, by the way, Michael Dorf, we should bring him back to the show. He came on the show not too long. Well, no, it was about a year ago. Anyway, I'll bring that. I just wrote that down. Michael Dorf can take us A to Z through redistricting. Basically, what it means is that Democrats are going to do everything they can to remain in control of the map drawing. And so this gets in the issue of fair maps. There's a movement of reformers, I put it in quotes because I'm as I said before, very hesitant to use the word reform in regards to anything positive that happens in Illinois or anywhere actually in the country. But there's a movement to just draw maps without any regard whatsoever to the politics of it. It's almost like you have a computer. Just design the boundaries so that all you need is to have every district have roughly the same number of people in it. And that way, if you eliminate politics, then you won't have these like super red MAGA districts that would never, ever, ever in a million years elect even a moderate Republican, even like a Mitt Romney type Republican. And then, of course, you wouldn't have all the packing of Democrats into districts so that you really effectively dilute the power of Democrats by concentrating so many Democrats into one district instead of spreading them out. So they have more power. So as a principle, it's a great idea. However, if you just limit it to the state of Illinois, all that does is give more power to the Republicans and take power away from the Democrats. Meanwhile, in the state of Wisconsin, those Republicans who control the map writing process, they're not giving up their power. Michigan, they're not giving up their power. So that's what Shio Campos is getting at, D. The Democrats are going to do everything they can to make sure in the state of Illinois that the Democrats are drawing the maps to meet their political objectives, which means drawing legislative maps that maximize the voting advantages of Democrats and minimizes the voting strength of Republicans. So that's what they're getting at.
So there you go. We're going to have to keep up on that story. The deadline is going to be happening very soon. Boy, how about that map redistricting talk, huh? Good times on the Ben Joravsky Show. All right, everybody, that is our local news. Remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows, Benny J bonus interviews, and so much more at chicagoreader.com and wherever else you download podcasts, all right? If you listen on the download, by the way, check us out on the live stream chat sometime, on the live stream. Tuesdays through Fridays, 1 until 3 p.m. Central Time at the Chicago Reader YouTube channel. You can always send us an email, bennyjshow@gmail.com, BENNY, the letter J, show, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and you can call the Ben Joravsky Show. It is true, all right? We have a phone number, 708-658-4788. The number again, 708-658-4788. Leave us a voicemail, and, if you're not crazy, we'll more than likely play it on the Ben Joravsky Show. All right, Sameena Mustafa is going to be coming up here. Sameena, can you hear us?
Yes.
All right, awesome. So far, so good here. We can hear Sameena. She can hear us. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more with Sameena Mustafa. Don't go anywhere.
I'm sick of it!
I won't just turn the car around. I'm going to shut it off. I'm going to kick you out, and I'm going to make you walk home.
First and foremost, when you're out on a snowmobile, never consume alcohol and drugs before or during your ride.
right, here we go. Hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show for Thursday, January 28th is brought to you by the Chicago Federation of Labor, SEIU Healthcare, Illinois, Indiana, and the Chicago Reader. Benny J, take it away.
I remember the day. It was about 2 years ago, something like that. I was at a radio station. Can't remember the name of the radio station. Anyway, I had heard that there was a left of center candidate running for Congress in the 5th Congressional District against Mike Quigley, who's very much of the centrist variety. Her name was Sameena Mustafa. So I invited her on the show. And that's how I met Sameena Mustafa, who I think, I've always said she's the AOC of Chicago. And she didn't win that election. AOC won her election in 2018. And ever since then, Sameena Mustafa, I've been trying to figure out what's the difference between Chicago and New York, a conversation we've had more than once. You've been a regular on the show. Both at that radio station I can't remember, and in this podcast, but you haven't been on in a while. So welcome back. Welcome back to the show. And something changed in your life. So why don't you tell folks what changed in your life and what's different about Sameena Mustafa now than from when you were on the show last, which I think was in October. Go ahead. I
now live in Los Angeles. So I can officially call myself a coastal elite. No, no. I was just a Midwestern elite, I guess, before. So we moved to Los Angeles, my husband and I. And so one of the things that Ben and I talked about before I jumped on just now is how Chicago looks to folks outside of Chicago. In addition to all the other political goings on and nonsense and shenanigans that seem to plague Chicago politics once and now and forever. So that's what's different. Well, it's really nice that you're in Los Angeles. It's nice and warm there. I'm sure right now we're in the middle of a cold snap and it's just miserable. So you made the right decision from the weather point of view. Since you talked about how Chicago, I was going to talk national first and go local, but let's start with how Chicago looks from afar, because I find this interesting. I've always found this interesting because the attitude that out-of-towners have toward our mayors, be it Daley or Rahm and Lori Lightfoot, is always different than what locals have, or at least what I have. So why don't you talk about just address that. How does Chicago look from the vantage point of somebody in LA, if you're following it from, I don't know, CNN or national television or national publications? Yeah, I was really struck by how the Chicago Public Schools opening and the closure and the conflict around that is being covered. And that was the thing we had touched upon on the phone. And to me, it doesn't portray Chicago in a really good light. I mean, I can just say as a comparison, the head of LA USD, the school district, the superintendent here had said that they're not going to open schools until all the teachers have received the vaccine. So that's just one clear difference. The other thing is I would say, and this is something I perceived while in Chicago as well, is that political reporting that is national doesn't really get past the surface in Chicago. People don't spend the time to talk to activists or advocates that they'll just talk to electeds and they'll stop there. So Lori Lightfoot's doing, if you don't live in Chicago, Lori Lightfoot doesn't look quite nearly so incompetent as she in fact is. And so, I remember having a kind of a Twitter exchange with somebody who runs a political podcast. She's based in Seattle and was saying, Lori Lightfoot's, a trailblazer and all this stuff. And I was like, and telling her, look, Black and brown folks in Chicago fought her election. They did not want her in that office. And so, whatever comms firm that Lightfoot, Rahm, and all of these politicos share are doing their job well. They're putting their name in the national press in a way to make them look like they're doing their job. But Chicagoans know the truth, which is that they're doing a terrible job.
You shared with me the Politico op-ed that Rahm wrote this week. I just, my jaw just dropped reading that. I'm thinking, you're really talking about investing in education, Mr. Close 50 Chicago public schools? Like, what? How did that even? Well, I don't trust Politico to be in, it's not a lefty rag, as it were. Any publication that's going to give a guest editing role to Ben Shapiro is one that no longer can be counted on as a responsible journalism outlet. I was getting the playbook. I unsubscribed. I finally was like, this is it. I'm done. I'm done with Politico. I begrudgingly clicked on the link you sent me. I'm very, I am struck by how the press has learned absolutely nothing since Trump, and they're repeating the same mistakes. And Chicago's political media does kind of makes a lot of the same mistakes. They focus on the Jussie Smolletts and not on the substance. And then they let people like Rahm, kind of rewrite history.
Well, I just want to take issue with just one thing you said before I take a deeper dive in it. Black and brown people opposed Lori Lightfoot. She was elected across the board with widespread support in 2019.
29% of the electorate voted for her. So that was turnout. Was it like?
Yeah, 29%? Turnout. Okay.
So let's be clear that, that's like Trump, that's Trumpian numbers. Okay. And a majority so I mean, let's take a step back and see, what does our democracy do to engage folks who are, have lost confidence in the system. So I don't have a lot of, she does not have a mandate in a meaningful way. And unfortunately, even the people who I think wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, present company excluded, realize that she has, sort of frittered away that goodwill.
Yeah. Well, by the way, this is an age-old argument, and I knew you would come back at it, Sameena, and there's really nothing I could say, because my old friend Pat Hill used to do this to me all the time when I would say, well, Pat, black people elected Rahm Emanuel in 2011, and she'd go, Ben, only, and then I forget what percentage it was, only like 30% voted, and I go, I can't argue with that. There is so much... it is a very dispirited, to put it mildly, electorate in the city of Chicago. And part of the reason is that so many people don't believe that the people we elect are going to look out for their best interests. And I can completely understand why when I see the discussion of opening the public schools before people have been vaccinated, and there's not even a clamor, Sameena. This part is just really sinking into my head, where I don't want to leave Chicago completely yet, but I just got to say, like, the way we're distributing the vaccine, like, I kind of just, follow me to Sameena. I just I took it in stride. You know what I mean? I was just like, oh, it's taking a while because these drug companies, they control it and they don't have made enough. And then one day I was just like, it hit me. I'm like, wait a minute, why are we distributing the vaccine to private drug companies?
Right.
If this is a health crisis that's affecting absolutely everybody in this country.
Right.
Why haven't we manufactured enough vaccine for everybody to be vaccinated?
Right.
It's so anyway, it all ties together. But getting back to what you were talking about, Chicago's attitude, it seems to me, get your thoughts on this, the attitude, the view people have of Chicago from outside the city, that our leaders, be it Daley, Rahm, or Lori Lightfoot, are viewed as more progressive than they actually are by folks outside of Chicago. Am I right in that?
I would say that is definitely true of Lightfoot. I think she gets credit because of her identity. And I think Rahm has been trying to cast himself, reinvent himself since he's no longer been mayor. And sometimes it's been successful and sometimes people call BS on it in a very public way. I mean, when he was very clearly lobbying for a position in the Biden administration, it's very clear that this was a Rahm wants Rahm in the administration campaign. And people saw through it. Now, what some people rightfully pointed out is, while this may have been, a Rahm solo campaign, it did sort of obscure maybe some of the other nominees that may not have been great, and then kind of, let some of those folks slip in. But to me, Rahm has tried to reinvent himself, and I think there's a couple of things that come to mind when it comes to Rahm's reputation, and he is sort of a metaphor for Chicago politics in so many ways. I mean, the fact that he came back to Chicago to run for mayor, I'm sure you've probably, like, he was able to come back and say, like, oh, this has always been like, kind of like, oh, I this is like, a way for me to, fulfill some kind of dream. I have no idea what was going on in his head, but it's like, how does it happen that you are really in the most powerful position, unelected position in the United States? Chief of staff at the White House is without a doubt the most powerful unelected position, in the country. You got pushed out. How did he come back to Chicago and be able to cast himself as somehow, hometown hero coming home to take over for Daley and bring Chicago back? Now, I will say this. There was, I was in a role where I was working in commercial real estate and saw that there was a difference, and where all of a sudden there was a spigot turned on of corporate relocations to Chicago. So Rahm was using whatever connections he had, whatever reputation he had was better than Daley's, but clearly we know what happened next, right? Rahm closed 50 schools, he closed mental health clinics, he's just profoundly cynical. And let's go back a few decades. I mean, Rahm in many ways was the Stephen Miller of the Clinton administration, right? Ideologically, he pulled Clinton to the right on so many issues. I mean, when he was running for mayor in 2011, there's all these memos that he, penned to say, do this, do that on immigration, on crime. And so he has really tried to reinvent himself. And I feel like in some ways, what Rahm has done is very similar to what a lot of other Chicago politicos have done. They've tried to reinvent themselves, rebrand themselves. I feel like in some ways, like, we talk a lot about like the revolving door of lobbying and political appointments and political office. But one thing that doesn't get enough scrutiny is how many journalists go into comms role and vice versa. And that's sort of like a laundering of someone's reputation. Like, Rahm is constantly trying to run away from his very public record. And like, that op-ed was a perfect example of that. Like, how did that end up in print or online without some acknowledgement? Like, Rahm closed 50 schools and now he's talking about telling Biden to invest in education. Like, what is going on? This is like, it makes no sense. But again, this is a microcosm of what happens throughout the Chicago political media. I mean, I would say Chicago political reporters, present company accepted, are really just publicists or stenographers. They're not doing the kind of pushback or really looking at the records of, especially when stuff, I think you brought up like a perfect metaphor. Like, a lot of political reporters treat, especially federal officials, like visiting dignitaries. They're sort of hands off, like, oh, thank you, Senator, thank you, Representative, thank you for being here, thank you for talking to me, and never looking at their records. It's absurd, and it's why we don't have look at where we are in terms of leadership. Like, where's Illinois in terms of national leadership? The congressman that's getting the most press right now is Adam Kinzinger. Yeah. And you guess what he's gunning for? He's going to run for mayor. or something. I mean, I'm run for governor rather. He's going to run for something, right? That's why he doesn't care about losing his seat.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other story, whether he could get out of a Republican primary, having taken such a strong stand against Donald Trump. I don't know if Adam Kinzinger could be victorious in a run for governor, Sameena, because I'm not certain he can win the Republican primary. Right. And MAGA controls the Republican Party, and MAGA is really mad at Adam Kinzinger right now. So he may be the kind of Republican that a moderate Dem would vote for.
That's what I'm worried about, yeah.
Yeah, but to get to that state, that position, he has to win the Republican nomination. And there's a group of MAGA, true blue MAGA people who would going to be running in that. So maybe if MAGA divides up its vote, Kinzinger could win.
But, If Jeannie Ives and some other somebody else who sort of fits the bill, then I think that could very well happen.
Yeah, I don't even know if there's enough. Having said that, I don't even know if there's enough moderate Republicans left, even if MAGA divides the vote. That's how bad things are with the Republican Party. Let's move on from Chicago for the moment and talk about national issues. You had some really profound thoughts about the insurrection that took place, the riot at the Capitol on January 6th. I've talked to you a couple times about this. Why don't you share some of your general ideas about that matter?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I found it really just horrific and disturbing and scary. And the more I learn about it, the more I realize it could have been a mass casualty event. And I want to be also really clear that the people who were at the greatest risk are the people who are browner and blacker, or like the people of color. I mean, yes, they were gunning for Mike Pence. They were literally gunning for Mike Pence, and they were in Nancy Pelosi's office. But let's be clear that they, the stories about the panic buttons being ripped out of Ayanna Pressley's office. They just arrested a man in Texas who was going to try to assassinate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, like, these are very, I think there is just not enough there's not really an understanding of how dangerous this was and could have been. And then it came on the heels of what happened in Nashville, which sort of like came and went, and which is really terrifying because, so nobody died in that particular blast, but that happened. And it was very much in the same vein of like someone who was aggrieved and seemed to have the same sort of motivation. And I feel like what happened on January 6th it's not over. Like, it is continuing. You have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and this Madison Cawthorn. Like, I think that rep Madison Cawthorn even said, like, most of my team is for comms and not legislative, which means that he is completely trying to spin himself as a MAGA, 2.0. Same with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, this is a person who, has been publicly Islamophobic. The video that just came out in the last 24 hours is her literally chasing after David Hogg, who survived, a school shooting, and say that he is some kind of George Soros. Let's just be clear. All of these sort of bigotries overlap: racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, transphobia, homophobia. They're all of these are, they're a feature of the Republican Party. These are not just one-off things. These are where the party is. I mean, people are remembering how Ronald Reagan gave that speech in Mississippi, where the 3 civil rights workers, I mean, they were using their indoor voice, but now these people, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Lauren Boeberts, these people are literally bringing weapons into the Capitol. I mean, and so understandably, people are saying, I don't feel safe around you. I don't trust you. And then I look and look what happened after the riot. Brad Schneider, COVID positive. Pramila Jayapal, COVID positive. That was just another feature of it. It's like, we don't care about your safety. And what is really shocking to me is that all of this occurred literally the day after, the Georgia Senate races, right? It occurred right after someone who people had sort of counted out, Stacey Abrams, and other people in the Georgia ecosystem, mostly women of color, did something that people didn't think was possible. I think there's fundamentally is so much that people are missing because they just don't want to, they can't give credence to the fact that they might be part of the problem. Somebody tweeted something that I just thought made a lot of sense, which is like, too many people in politics are there for their proximity to power, not to actually do anything. Yeah. And that could describe the entire Illinois delegation. That could describe, most of the people who are in city council, certainly describes Lori Lightfoot. I mean, that's the problem. If you are trying to get more people to come out and vote and beat those 29, 30% numbers, something has to change. You need to have better outcomes, and you need to have people who are actually committed to doing something and follow through. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have to say, one thing I am struck by, and I Joe Biden was not my first choice, but a couple of things that they've done early on have actually been quite positive. Are they doing everything they said they would? Probably it's not going to happen. And I think one of the biggest issues is they're still trying to play that game of, we want to be bipartisan. Yeah. And it is really, it's not going to work. The Republican Party none of them are operating in good faith. Not a single one.
All right. Before I take the deep dive into the bipartisanship ruse, I just wanted to just tell people, that was a great riff, by the way. Sameena, you were alluding to a speech that Ronald Reagan made in 1980 when he announced his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, talking about state rights. It was a dog whistle, and now people are shouting through bullhorns, and that's what you were alluding to. It's very distressful. I talked about this before you came on the show. Sarah Huckabee Sanders announced she's running for governor in the state of Arkansas and brags about the service she made to Donald Trump. And then Trump endorsed her campaign. And she talks about the need for law and order and to stand up, be tough on crime. And no mention is made whatsoever about what went down on January 6th. And the Republicans have already made it clear that there's no way they're going to vote. But they need 17 Republicans to impeach Donald Trump. They're not going to get those 17. It's pretty obvious. So now already the Democrats are sort of like backing off the real moderates. Well, maybe we should go for censure. Do you follow what I'm saying? Yeah. So what you outlined is true. I'm just looking at the headline in New York Times. U.S. extremists pose a threat, agency warns. I mean, this is serious. Yeah. At the same time, the other major political party in this country, not only does not recognize it as a serious threat, but is already moving toward condoning it. I mean, right now, they went from that one day, Sameena, on January 6th, of objecting to it and criticizing the insurrection. And now they're sort of in the position of, minimizing it by saying, well, it wasn't that bad, or, the president didn't incite it, and we shouldn't impeach him anyway. And the next step, I could see it already in the rhetoric of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, is to almost owning it, or to at least welcome back the people who were on those Capitol steps. It's a frightening moment, Sameena. I'm not quite sure what we should do. What should the Democrats, in your humble opinion, do at this moment?
I don't know how or if Joe Biden his constitution, no pun intended, is built for this. But we need somebody who is willing to push back and say, no, this is enough. Like, you're not. He said some things at the inauguration speech that surprised me. He said the phrase white supremacy, which frankly, a lot of white liberals won't say. So I give his speechwriters and give him credit for saying that. But there was the podcast that I shared with you, which was the one, there's a writer who wrote a book called Race and Reunion. I believe his name is David Blight. And he was basically talking about what happened after the Civil War. And, we have not done well with, sort of punishing the people who tried to destroy our country. And all that's happened is that the people who were the most vulnerable got hurt. And that's what's essentially happened time and time again. And so I don't have confidence in the Biden administration to do this, but that's what needs to happen. It needs to be clear. Look, you tried to overthrow a fair and free election. There must be consequences. So seeing headlines like, oh, the Justice Department and the FBI are weighing whether they want to overwhelm local courts. I never had that problem when the defendants were black and brown. Never had that problem. Somehow you weren't worried about overloading the courts. And then I see headlines like, I think I just saw something from Axios. Democrats and Republicans each have their extremists. Oh yeah, AOC, she's such an extremist. She wants people to have health care and a minimum wage. That's terrible. What are they talking about? This is like this, and unfortunately, Axios, Punch Bowl, Politico, they're all from the same, they're all the same mentality, which is this both sides. And frankly, the New York Times is in the same bucket, right? They're all trying to placate the right wing and having no sort of self-awareness. Like, these are people who literally want us dead. They wanted to kill Mike Pence. Mike Pence, the evangelical who has been loyal to Trump till almost the end. I mean, think about it. Mike Pence, if they want to kill Mike Pence, you and I are dead, Ben.
Yeah.
So, and Dennis too. Sorry, Dennis, I didn't mean to leave you out. But I mean, that's it. Yeah. I mean, this is beyond a partisan conversation. And that's where I think this is where reporting and media has a role to play, but they're failing miserably at is they're not understanding the violence here. You've had law enforcement missing this for two reasons, primarily. One, too many of these folks are in their own ranks, and it's hard to kind of go after people who fit your profile. Like, there's too many people who this person was a successful CEO from the suburbs of Chicago. What is this guy? A woman flies a private plane. Where's that economic anxiety you guys are talking about? Where's your diners in the middle of rural Iowa? Sorry, these folks, I don't feel sorry for them. There's nothing wrong. What is driving them? What radicalized them, to use a phrase that people often say about Muslims? It is something that's been part of our culture and part of our history that people just don't know. I mean, you can look and Google things like Tulsa and Wilmington, and I think people not knowing some of those incidents and I'm someone who's constantly seeking out that knowledge. And so I'm not claiming to be any kind of expert on this, but anytime you start reading some of these things, like Wilmington was a coup. Absolutely. If you, I believe the year was 1898, there was a duly elected local election, and the white supremacist coup that happened, they killed 30 people. That's the number that we history books have left us with. But I mean, it was because black and white folks came together, and there was a coalition government. They're like, no, this can't happen. I mean, that is what they were trying to do on January 6th.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to make another clarification, correction, something you said. Pence was loyal to Trump till the end. I would argue that he was loyal to the very, very end. He did not invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Donald Trump from office, even though Donald Trump had incited the riot that had people with rope ready to hang him. Okay. Yeah. And he still wouldn't. Invoke the 25th. And so I think Mike Pence is trying to have it both ways. You know, he's hoping that he can somehow position himself as MAGA's candidate in 2024. Good luck with that. He's probably going to face some of the same problems Adam Kinzinger is facing. You mentioned something that really grinds my gears, as they say, the false equivalency. Now, talk a little bit more about that, where somehow or other AOC is equated to an insurrectionist.
Okay, well, I'm going to share a story that you and I talked about before, which is when I was running, I remember people, you know, Justice Democrats was new. That was even before AOC's win, and that was in June of 2018. So people were still like, who are these people? What is Justice Democrats? And I will never forget this conversation I had with a member of Indivisible Chicago who said, oh, are you just going to be the Freedom Caucus of the left? And you could count on a liberal to make a false equivalence all day long. Yeah, no, we're not going to be the Freedom Caucus of the left because we're not going to storm the Capitol. We're not going to vote to cage children. We're not going to vote against Black Lives Matter. We're not going to oppose universal health care. Guess who does that? Mike Quigley. Like, these people have and that goes back to all of the things that I've been talking about. There's so little awareness of what our representatives actually do and what they stand for and what they say. And that's where the comms team comes into play. They create this illusion that, oh yeah, your rep is just as progressive because you're from a blue area. No, you're not. You have someone who is a hypocrite and who doesn't represent progressive values. And guess what? This nonsense about the Freedom Caucus of the left is absurd. There is also another strain that is in sort of leftist media, which is this whole concept of forcing a vote on Medicare for all, which I can't help but hear some of the same racist, sexist tropes in that. It's Jimmy Dore and his whole like shtick, which he is trying to say like, oh, the squad is terrible, AOC is terrible. He literally was like, I made her, she won't come back on my show. Like, what is the difference, honestly, on some level when it comes to this stuff? Like, yeah, I know you're talking about universal health care, but you're really talking about, you know, Black and brown women in office who are, you're acting like they serve you like they're slaves. Like there's something profoundly racist about how they speak about the squad. And so, I'm struck by the racism in the white supremacy and the sexism on the left that is really significant. It's something that people don't want to confront. Another thing that somebody mentioned was like everybody, who's a liberal or a leftist or progressive says, oh yeah, we believe in anti-racism. And then you look at their boards and their executive teams, they're all white. So you know what? If you really are truly anti-racist, why don't you step down? Why don't you hand your seat, your role to a person of color or a person from a marginalized person? You don't actually believe anything you're saying. We can see right through you. So this moment is, and this whole force the vote conversation was really gearing up right before this January 6th insurrection. And I just think like, these people almost died and you're talking about them like they're turncoats. Like they do need to be accountable. They are elected. They have constituents. But there is something that happens that is different and the scrutiny and the safety that folks who are in Congress who are people of color, Maxine Waters, AOC, Ayanna Pressley, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, like there is more danger that they are going through than even a Nancy Pelosi is. And certainly, like, the entire Illinois delegation is not, like, you know, I guess Brad Schneider notwithstanding, like, they're just not facing the same danger because they're not visible, and they weren't demonized by Trump. Trump went after Maxine Waters right away, called her stupid. I mean, and he did the same thing to Black women reporters on the at the White House, like Yamisha Elsindor. He did all these, April Ryan, all of these same things he did. There's no accidents. And so I have, I'm just really, I'm really frustrated by the false equivalence, as you said, but also the lack of awareness and, frankly, indifference towards the safety of these people of color who have put literally their lives on the line to step up and talk about things that we care about, like healthcare.
You mentioned something, and we might be good to close with it. A little positive amidst the bleakness. I'm not quite sure I see the positive, but maybe you can help me. You mentioned Biden's positives in the first 2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks of his presidency. What are some of the positives that you see?
So I'd say information. It sounds so like, it might sound like, what is it? Like, just the fact that they're having regular briefings and that they're taking questions. I did catch a little bit of the COVID-19 briefing, which, you know, there was a good section. Dr. Marcela Nunez-Smith was speaking about racial equity in the rollout. And so that is a big difference, right? Because the briefings that were happening under the Trump administration were really just like basically a nonstop, you know, set of fabrications. They were just like making stuff up. Now we're hearing from Deborah Birx that, like, she was presenting one set of numbers and another set of numbers was being shown to Trump. This cost lives. This is what I find a little frustrating. And I'm sorry, I'm like losing the positive thread, but people keep talking about how Trump didn't start a war. He killed 400,000 Americans. That's more than most wars.
By the way, I have to tell you this. Yes, and this reminds me of a debate I had on the show with Monroe Anderson. We were getting into a tangential discussion of who was worse as president, George W. Bush or Donald Trump. And I was taking the Bush position at the moment, and I was talking about the two wars that George Bush lost. And I go, well, at least, and I just said that at least Donald Trump didn't launch any major wars. And then Monroe came right back at me with, yes. And then what can I do?
You know what? Monroe and I should do we should have like a boxing match. You know, like Monroe and Sameena versus Ben.
I had to concede. Yeah, you raised a good point, Monroe. All right, let's move on.
But that's unfortunate that people don't see, you know, the reality of, you know, there is, personnel alone isn't policy, but it does make a difference sometimes who's in that seat. There was that story in the Tribune about a woman who left a church where she had been they had been keeping her safe in sanctuary for 3 years, and she finally left. I think it was last week. I think the Tribune reported it. Like, that to me is like, that's a big deal. She was scared enough that she wasn't gonna leave the church. Now, Biden has a lot to do with immigration, but there is a subset of folks who are affected by the Muslim ban, folks that are affected by deportations. The moratorium is 100 days. It's not enough. There's more to do. But those are steps in the right direction. Like, that's what I like.
I agree. And I just wanted to hear you say that. And I just look at these three headlines in today's paper. I'll just give you the headlines. President's team ousts holdovers from Trump's
era, and it has a lot to do with the Environmental Protection Agency. U.S. extremists pose a threat, agency warns. So it's like somebody's looking out for this stuff. And then this one, Biden pitches climate policy as a jobs plan, which is straight out of AOC's new Green Deal, I might add. So on all of those fronts, I would say that's progress. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, the second piece about the law enforcement seeing this, extremism as a problem, that's where I would say we need to have some more scrutiny. And this is where reporting and investigative work would be meaningful, because the fact is we've been through this with post 9/11. The amount of scrutiny, surveillance, and detention, and all of the things that the Muslim community went through, and that affected other communities that looked brown, whether they were Sikh or Hindu. Like, there are people who are experts in this. They've literally been through this, and so they need to be listened to when it comes to how things get framed, how we can improve some of these investigations. That's, some of these investigations regarding white supremacist activity were shut down because of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene waving their hands and saying, we need to be bipartisan. No, we don't. Because guess what? You just gave up you have no moral high ground. You never had it, but you definitely don't have it now.
Yeah, that video, by the way, I saw that yesterday. Marjorie Taylor Greene 2 years ago, walking after David. That was striking. Yeah, that was striking. She was berating him as he walked down the street, and it was offensive on many levels. And now she's a congresswoman from Georgia. By the way, we're running out of time here, but there's so much irony. One of the homework assignments I gave you, I don't know if you did it, was to look at what Tulsi Gabbard was saying, a former congresswoman from Hawaii, ran for Democrat president 2019. I talked a little bit about it the other day, but she's warning of overreach. Suddenly she's become a civil libertarian, and she's really concerned about her overreach, and that the government would be using what happened on January 6th as a pretext to take away the constitutional rights of Americans and spy on them, et cetera, and so forth. Have you had a chance to read through some of her comments? Do you have an opinion about them?
I haven't seen them. I saw the headline, but I didn't read through her comments. But this kind of ties into some of the things we talked about earlier, which is Tulsi Gabbard was a Jimmy Dore favorite, by the way. So it all makes sense. But she's someone who, ironically, her alignment with Modi and the Hindu fascists in India, it's like her support of them, she's finally now aligned her politics domestically with her approach in India. So it's like, it actually matches up. Modi is India's Trump, without a doubt. So at least she's being consistent now. She was pretending to be a Democrat or someone who believed in American democracy, and now she's revealing her true stripes. So I mean, I did not. It struck me how many folks on the left were fans of hers and refused to believe the stories about her alliances, where her money came from, and frankly, bought her BS, her spin, going back to that other theme, which is she was able to try to reinvent herself as she ran for president. But her record, what she had done, what she had said, and her voting record was brought up, rightfully so. Yeah. And so, she is someone who is going to continue to be a concern, because she does actually fit the profile of someone who would fit well in the sort of GOP. She's a veteran. She has a powerful story.
She does, and I have to thank you. And it is funny because when I got a talk show, I vaguely knew of Tulsi Gabbard, that the people on the left liked her, and it just was the three Indian Americans who came on my show. It's just amazing. Amisha Patel, I'm going to give shout outs. Amisha Patel, Sameena Mustafa, and Rahman Hussein. And just the three of you. And it wasn't like you guys planned it. Okay, I don't even know. Yeah. Well, I know you know Rahman. I don't know if you know Amisha. Anyway, the point is, it's like, it was, do you know, the name came up in passing, Tulsi Gabbard's name, and the three of you and your own I don't think it was planned in advance. I don't think it was a cabal of any kind. So do you know what Tulsi Gabbard's attitude is toward Muslims in India? And so, yeah, the left has its eyes closed and its ears closed too. That's for sure.
Which is why it's going to be difficult to push people and to this sort of force the vote concept. It won't succeed because there is this profound disconnect.
Yeah. All right, Sameena, before I let you go, tell folks about your podcast. You may have left Chicago, but you're still doing a podcast.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's called Hand Her the Mic. I just posted an episode with 3 women of color who were part of a women of color leadership cohort that I attended with Repower, which used to be the Wellstone Institute. And I'm going to be posting another episode soon with the founder of a site called Repro Jobs, and they remain anonymous, but they talk about all the racism and the issues in the reproductive rights arena. So like Planned Parenthood and all those places. And so that will be posted next month.
All right, very good. Hand her the mic. Sameena, it's great to have you back. We'll bring you on. You'll be I actually have 2 West Coast core. I just had, Constantine Anthony is his name, and he's a councilman in Burbank, California, which is outside of LA, and he's organizing Uber and Lyft drivers, gig economy workers. So I have 2 West Coast correspondents. How about
West
that?
Coast Bureau of the Ben Joravsky Show.
Every Chicago podcast needs one. All right, Sameena, stay safe and sound. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right, thanks so much.
Take care. That's the great Sameena Mustafa, our correspondent in LA. D, you got any updates for us?
To face this kind of historic moment, some might have Biden look to Lincoln and FDR for inspiration. But Teddy Roosevelt actually provides a more useful guide. Oh, man, I'm sorry. I was just reading the latest op-ed from Rahm Emanuel, How to Calm America's 100-Year Storm. You know, you were kind of hard on it, but it's not that bad.
All right, Dennis, I'm going to ask you the question. The tough question. No ducking, no dodging. In your humble opinion, having read at least the first paragraph of that essay, I doubt very much you read much more, did Rahm Emanuel actually write that essay? Go.
I read it, I loved it, and yes, of course.
Okay, I just needed to know that. I got some land I want to sell you, a bridge in Arizona.
Hey, let's do the back half. Only 2 stories. First up, breaking news. This comes from the Chicago Sun-Times and Rachel Hinton. Governor J.B. Pritzker said today that he's activated 500 Illinois National Guard members for a security mission in Washington, D.C. that will last until mid-March. We have a quote from Pritzker here. Quote, "The U.S. Department of Defense has asked Illinois to assist federal and local agencies in this continued effort, and Major General Neely and I are ready to ensure that the state of Illinois continues its proud legacy of protecting our democracy. Ultimately, we must root out the dark forces of racism, white supremacy, and disinformation that have created this moment. But until we do that, our extraordinary troops will deploy with honor."
That sounds great, but can I also ask in return, can you get us some vaccines? Just, a little help, Washington, D.C. on the vaccine front? We're in the middle of a pandemic. Yeah, D, the light went on in my head. I'm like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We have a solution, but somehow or other, we can't make enough of the solution. So how about we do a swap? National Guard We give you some National Guard protection. You give us some vaccines. How about that, D? Is that too much to ask for?
I like it. And hey, Pritzker, can you say something about the teachers union and the CPS thing?
I'm not a perfect person.
Good Lord.
He's not getting into that one. Oh, no. Chicago what? Chicago Public what? I'm not going anywhere near that one. Nope. Lori who? I never heard of her.
So that was some breaking news, huh?
Yeah, that was good, yeah.
And lastly, Chicago Fraternal Order of Police President John Catanzara. I've asked it once, and I'll ask it again. Dude, why do you live in Chicago and keep torturing yourself? Seriously. The following comes from the Chicago Sun-Times and Fran the Woman Spielman. John Catanzara, the controversial firebrand who leads the biggest Chicago police officers union, is again facing administrative charges that could lead to his firing from the Chicago Police Department. These new charges, made public Wednesday by the Chicago Police Board, allege Catanzara filed a false police report against former police superintendent Eddie Johnson after Johnson took part in an anti-violence march on the Dan Ryan Expressway in July 2018. Catanzara, quote, knowingly generated a case incident report under RD number JB346816. Falsely and or misleadingly listing Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson as an offender for criminal trespass to state-supported land. In November 2018, Catanzara filed another police report against Commander Ronald Pentecore Jr., listing the commander, quote, as an offender for interference with public officer obstructing justice, according to the charges. It's also alleged that Catanzara identified himself as, quote, Beat 801, a designation reserved for CPD supervisor. Catanzara could not be reached for comment on Wednesday.
Oh, Johnny C. going underground. Can't be reached for comment with the bright one? That's how you're treating the Sun-Times, Johnny? You know how many times they put your picture in that paper promoting you? So much to unpack in this one, D. I got to say this. John Catanzara's politics are way to the right. Far to the right from me. And yet, every now and then, I find myself, like, kind of defending the guy. So, I don't know. Like, of all the horrific things that he's allegedly done, this is what you're coming up with. I mean, the Tribune article, I got to give the Tribune credit. They wrote a long article. It was a front-page story. Here it is. Tribune. Chicago FOP leader faces new charges. Who wrote it? Give the guy a shout-out. Jeremy Gorder. Details all the offenses this guy, these horrific things he said on social media about Muslims, just really hate-filled dreck. So there's a lot of reasons why this man has disrespected the badge that he got to wear when he became a Chicago police officer. But I don't know, the whole thing about filing the report about Eddie Johnson, I just like to say something, MAGA. You guys are so freaking inconsistent. I just got to go back in time, 2018. Eddie Johnson and Father Flagler and Jesse Jackson, they led a march. Well, Eddie Johnson didn't lead the march, but Father Flagler and Jesse Jackson were going to lead a march. They just felt that the powers that be in our city and our state were ignoring the carnage that was happening year after year in black communities, the crime rate. So it was like either, police tactics weren't working, there wasn't enough investigation of crimes that had been committed so that there was like an incentive not to shoot people. We were not enforcing gun laws enough to prevent the just mass distribution of guns, perhaps hold gun manufacturers liable for the murders that occur with their weaponry would be something we would consider, but no, Congress wasn't going to do that. There wasn't, maybe we need more jobs so that people, aren't idle. Maybe we need more medical, we know we need more mental health care, but no, we're closing clinics. All these things that might have been done to address the carnage were not being addressed. And so they had protests. And so much of what MAGA says
It's like when black activists protest against police shootings, MAGA says, why don't you ever talk about people killed by black on black crime? Well, here we're activists trying to bring attention to that. And what does Canizera do? Eddie Johnson stood with Flagger and Jesse Jackson. I consider it like a significant moment of solidarity between the police department and activists, something that the police department could work from, like to build better relations. You know, as a start. And what's Johnny Canizera do? He writes up a complaint. He's mad. I thought you guys wanted activists to address the issue of black on black crime. So when they address it, you write up a complaint. I mean, I'm not quite sure what MAGA wants from black people other than the mass incarceration of black people. So I don't get why he would be so mad at Eddie Johnson for doing that. But he got mad at Eddie Johnson for doing that, and now it's coming back to haunt him. But all the things he did, D, that's like the least of it. Writing up a complaint about Eddie Johnson. And if that's what gets him fired, just shake my head. In Chicago, the way we do things in Chicago, I do not understand. But yeah, I read that one, and it had me shaking my head on a couple of fronts, D. What does MAGA want people to do? I guess they're mad at Jesse Jackson and Father Flagger and Eddie Johnson for trying to take a stand against black on black crime, but they want them punished for that. Weird stuff, D.
At a moment when questions of inclusion and exclusion gird nearly every political and economic debate, Washington needs to focus on giving every citizen the tools required to build a prosperous middle class. I cannot put this Rahm Emanuel story down.
Gird. Where did he come up with that word?
I don't know.
Remember Rahm writing in the basement? He's writing his little essay about transportation in Chicago, and he needs help with the word. So he yells up to his wife, honey, what's another word for, I don't know, train? Transit? Oh, thank you.
I think you're being a little biased. This one's pretty good. I maybe give it a second read. Maybe you'll like it. But yeah.
How about you give it a first read?
What are you talking about? I've been reading it. I'm almost done.
It's pretty funny.
But anyway, Canizera, I said it once. Dude, remember my prediction. Ben. John Canizera, by June, will be no longer the president of the FOP. He will step down, and he will be living in Florida.
Yeah, and have a podcast. It'll be hugely successful. Yeah. MAGA will love. When MAGA discovers Johnny C, I'm like, dude, why don't you move to South Dakota? You could run for like governor. You'll be huge in like South Dakota, MAGA portions of Florida, Wyoming. I don't know, man. Hanging around Chicago. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. He go down to Florida, MAGA man in Florida will, oh my God, they go, where have you been all my life? Can I hug you? They will love him almost as much as the Chicago Sun-Times photo editor.
Loves dude, not even trying to talk trash. Like, dude, John Kent, why do you live here, man? You're making your life miserable. Like, just go somewhere where people will, hell yeah, this guy's awesome.
Maybe he likes it.
The pizza is good.
But you know what? He's going to go down to Florida. You're so right. He's going to have a podcast. He's going to be huge. He's going to be the next Rush Limbaugh. You hit it on the head, D. And
he's just going to go right past us and just be the next Rush Limbaugh, huh?
Yeah. Right past us. Anyway.
So that is our Ben Joravsky show for today. Remember, you can download previous Benny J shows, guest interviews, so much more at chicagoreader.com and wherever else you download podcasts. Over 800 episodes, all right? I'm sure there's one or two you may have missed, so go check that out, chicagoreader.com and wherever else you download podcasts. Remember, you can find us online at Benny J Show, BENNY, the letter J Show, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can always send us an email, bennyjshow@gmail.com. And yes, we have a phone number, 708-658-4788. Doogie, we played your voicemail last week. That number again, 708-658-4788. We would love to hear from you. and not that Mike Boast guy.
I'm sick of it. Every year we give power to one person.
Not him, you. We want to hear from.
Post, he's gone. Madigan's no longer the speaker, so you don't have to complain anymore. All right, I want to thank Sameena Mustafa, did an outstanding job, as she always does. And Slugger, let's not forget Slugger, our mystery guest. She killed it, man. Great job, Slugger. And of course, I want to thank the man, the myth, the legend, the pride and joy of Alton, Illinois, without whom this show is possible. And as Johnny C. and Sameena Mustafa will tell you, back home in Alton, they call him White Lightning. Give yourself a raise, take it out of petty cash. See you tomorrow, everybody.
I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. Every year.
I won't just turn the car around. I won't just turn the car around. I won't just turn the car around. I'm going to shut it off. I'm going to kick you out, and I'm going to make you walk home.
I'm sick of it.